I think I think if you all don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and record this because if some people can't come tonight, I know we have a few people that cannot come. So I think Corey will be here in a little while, so she may be a little bit later. So we normally start out with Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, and I believe everybody knows that. Can you repeat after me? Om Namo
Om Namo
Bhagavate
Bhagavate
Bhagavate Vasudev
Vasudevaya.
Vaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om
Om
Namo
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
One more time. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Oh, beautiful. So that is the chant that we normally do before we study any of the Shastric evidences. And so tonight we're going to be studying the fourth chapter of the Bhagavad-gītā called Transcendental Knowledge. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Now, you may have to mute out your thing. I hate that, and I'm just going to chant through this. It's fairly short, and then we'll start the class. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Om Bhagavan Shri Krishna Bhagavan. O Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna Bhagavan. O Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna Bhagavan. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna Bhagavan. Jai Shri Krishna. 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 Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Jai Shri Bhagavan Shri Krishna.
Yay. Denise has joined us.
Hey Denise, how are you?
Hi, Denise.
Hi.
How you doing? Good to see you. Glad you could be here. Okay, guys. So I think what we're going to do is go ahead and get started on this chapter. And if you want to follow along, I'm going to first of all tell you some bullet points. So if you want to jot any of these notes down, please do. If not, we're kind of going to go back over it again a little bit also. But there's pivotal verses in this chapter that Srila Prabhupada used to regularly quote, and those are verses that we'll come back to here in a few moments. But this chapter covers a lot of ground in 42 verses. So Krishna says a lot in one verse, okay? He gives the absolute truth, complete self-realization, how to go back home, back to Godhead in one verse. But he also elaborates for us so that we can kind of enter into the mysteries of understanding the absolute truth. So in this particular chapter, Krishna establishes the history of the imperishable science of yoga. We're going to go back over that in a moment, but that's one thing that you might want to make a footnote on, is that Krishna establishes the Bhagavad-gītā as being repeated over and over and over and over again throughout all history, not just this one time, but throughout all time. And he does that by speaking it to Vivishwan, the sun god. He talks about that in detail with Arjuna. We're going to go back over that in a moment. The other thing that's so interesting about this chapter, in my opinion, is that Krishna establishes the requirement of the parampara, which is the disciplic succession, which comes from God and comes down to us, unbroken, unchanged, through the pure devotees of the Lord. And a pure devotee of the Lord is one who would not change. It's not our intelligence is minute. So we have to take the intelligence of the Lord and communicate it to one another just as it was spoken. That's why we study Bhagavad-gītā as it is, not as you might like to hear it, or somebody might have paid enough money to have it changed, or somebody was trying to stroke their ego and wrote it in some way, or some poetic thing, or throw Krishna out, put me in. This is the problem with the material world. So many yogis, but very, very few, very, pure devotees of the Lord. Mostly yogis are bogus. In other words, they're taking what God has given and changing that message. We do not do that, will not do that, do not want to do that. And so to stay in the parampara, the disciplic succession, we cannot change anything about it. That's the number thing that's very, very important. And then as we go along, Krishna also establishes himself as coming in his eternal form, his original eternal form. Satchidananda Vigraha, is his form. He doesn't take a material body. Krishna does not take a material body like you and I. He's not subjected to the three modes of material nature, ignorance, passion, and goodness. And he is not subject to any work or any karma. Krishna is well above all of that. So he establishes that, and he discusses why that's so important for you to understand, and that he would understand too. I mean, that anyone could understand. He also tells why he comes again and again. He tells when he comes, he tells why he comes, and what his purposes are when he comes in this chapter, which I think is way cool. And then he explains pure devotional service, that anyone that would take refuge of Krishna, he explains how they can be delivered from repeated birth and death. Now, he does talk a little bit about the demigods. And he explains that men in this world seeking fruitive results for their actions, right, go to the demigods, and the demigods swiftly reward such things. Unfortunately, the fruits of our action in the material world are based in good, bad karma, and they're also, the reactions are temporary, right? So we go to Vishnu, we go to God. We don't go to demigod, we go to God, because God entails all of the demigods. In other words, if you had $1 million, all of your $100 problems are immediately solved. So why settle for less, right? You see what I'm talking about? So we respect the demigods, of course, and they're great devotees of the Lord. And if you read Srimad Bhagavatam, you can hear all about the dramas that they're constantly going through. He teaches us in this chapter how to become unentangled from the reactions of our work. And he tells us how important it is in this chapter to approach a bona fide spiritual master. So this is established right off the bat with Arjuna, that one should find the self-realized soul and hear the information from that personality. And by doing that, Krishna ensures Arjuna that he would never fall again to the material world. That's pretty strong, guys. By understanding that transcendental knowledge, imbibing that, and becoming wisdom a part of your being, then you never fall again to the material world. So that's very, very important. And then he goes on to say that even if you're the most sinful of all sinners that ever existed, you can cross over this ocean of birth and death by approaching the spiritual master and learning this most sublime information of transcendental knowledge, which is the name of the chapter. And also it ends at the very end of the chapter, and I've just kind of given a little run through here, and then we're going to go back through. But at the very end of all this explanation, Krishna says, he tells Arjuna, armed with yoga, stand and fight. So at this end of this chapter, Krishna is very directive, and he tells Arjuna, be free from all doubt. Armed with yoga, stand and fight. And I love that. So whenever we're having a problem in life, or we're have some doubts or whatever like that, we want to arm ourselves with yoga, literally. Arjuna was in the midst of a big, big fratricidal war. Millions of people were about to die. And Arjuna, as you know, in the previous chapters, we discussed how he succumbed to compassion, actually. He called it miserly weakness, is the way Arjuna described it, but I describe it as his great compassion. He did not want to kill his relatives and so forth. And he had fallen prey to a lesser understanding, and so Krishna gave him the correct understanding in this entire dialogue, which started with Arjuna accepting Krishna directly as his spiritual master. He said, now I'm a soul surrender to you. Please instruct me. He was completely confused. Now, our prayer, Om Jnana Timirandasya Gnananjana Salakaya Chakshuru Militanjana Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha, means we're all born in the darkness of ignorance. And you think if your teachers or your government or your parents or your best friends in school are going to be able to give you transcendental knowledge, where are you going to get transcendental knowledge at? So you have to approach the spiritual master, one who already has entered into the Sampradaya. So, okay, so is there any comment or question before we actually start? Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a few verses here that we might even want to chant together. But let's go back to the top. I just wanted to give you a little roundup, a little synopsis of what we were going to learn in this chapter in 42 verses. And there's about 15, 20 verses which we'll go over and read together. And then there's about 4 or 5 verses that we'll chant Sanskrit on, okay? And then we'll open the floor for discussion or questions or comments or whatever you guys might want to add, okay? So we'll start back at the top, Transcendental Knowledge. So if you want to go to your Bhagavad-gītā, you can do that, and you can kind of follow along. We're going to skip along here a little bit. We're not going to cover everything entirely. But the personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god, who instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu in turn instructed it to Ishvaku, and the supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. So this is very, very important, guys. This particular second verse, 4:2, make a note, if you will, to study this verse. Ivam parampara praptam imam rajarsiyo vidu sakalenaha mahata yogo nashta parantapa. What that means is that the supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession. And the saintly kings understood it in that way, but in due course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science, as it is, appears to be lost. Now we've got a problem on our hands, don't we? The science has been lost, appears to be lost, because the world has become degraded. They become adharmic, the Kurus themselves represented a dharma, and the Pandavas represented dharma, the right action, and the Kurus represented the wrong action. Wrong action based sinful activities such as lust, greed, power hungry, false ego, possession, attachment to the material world, looking for all types of varieties of sense gratification, which are temporary and binding to karma, as Krishna describes in Bhagavad-gītā. And they were all about that. So much so, we described in the previous chapters, they were willing to kill the Pandavas, take their king, burn their house down. I mean, is that a good thing to do? Is that sinful? That's a dharma. Burn their house down. They did all kind of things. If you look in the Mahabharata, you can find out all the things they did, and it's shocking, really, that 5,000 years ago this type of behavior was going on planet Earth. All right, so Krishna says, but the same science is being repeated today, told to you, because you're my devotee, you're my friend. So what is the qualification for understanding Bhagavad-gītā? We have to hear Bhagavad-gītā submissively, and we have to do it in a favorable way. We have to be submissive and hear the words of God submissively from the mouth of God. Bhagavan Uvacha. God said. So in this situation, Krishna is explaining it to Arjuna because they're friends. And he said, as such, being my devotee, you can enter into the mysteries of this understanding of this great science of yoga, the imperishable science that is attached to every living being in the material world. If you fall in the material world, you got to learn this science. It's not that you can convert from one religion to the next, 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 trying to find your best flavor of the week. It's like going to Baskin Robbins. Yeah, if you go down any street in Bowling Green, Kentucky, Susan, there are literally First Baptist, Second Baptist, Third Baptist, Fourth Baptist, Primitive Baptist, Reformed Baptist. They finally had to reform, apparently. So, see what I'm saying? I'm just saying that the ultimate goal, Krishna says at the end of Bhagavad-gītā, is abandon all varieties of these religions, especially man-made religions. Anything that's come into being, its death is certain. But we don't want to discourage people, but we want to encourage people in the way of devotion. Krishna also says that in Bhagavad-gītā. So Arjuna questions him because the sun god is senior, and Krishna says, many births both you and I have taken. I remember them all, but you cannot. Krishna goes on to describe his situation as having a transcendental body that never deteriorates, the Lord of all living entities, but he appears in every millennium in his original transcendental form. So God is coming again and again and again and again, like waves of the ocean. And then he goes on to describe why he's coming. So if you look at text 7, you'll see that Krishna says these words. Yada yadahi dharmasha, glanir bhavati bharata, abhutanami dharmasha, tadatmanam srijamyaham. And that, translated, means whenever, so he tells when, and wherever, so he tells where, there's a decline in religious practice and a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time Krishna descends himself. So now we know why God is coming. We know what he does when he gets here, because the next verse describes that. This is one you'll want to write down. These are ones Prabhupada always quoted. So text 7 is Paritranaya Saranam Vinashaya Chadushkritam Dharma Samstapanartaya Sambhavami Yuge Yuge. So Paritranaya Sadhunam means that he's coming to protect or to deliver the sadhus. Sadhus are the devas. They're the devotees of the Lord. Okay? Then he says, Vinashaya Chadushkritam. Dushkritam means I'm coming to kill those demons. There's no question about it. And reestablish Dharma. Yuge, yuge. That's yuga after yuga, or millennium after millennium. Krishna is coming again and again and again. This is a very important verse in this chapter. And these are the three verses so far that I'd like you guys to remember out of all the things that we're discussing here today, because they're very, very, very important. Now, Krishna assures us that if you know him, if you understand his transcendental nature of his appearance, his activities, upon leaving the body, you do not take another birth again in the material world, but you attain to Krishna's eternal abode. What? Think about it. We get to go home simply by knowing God and understanding his transcendental activities and realizing he did not take a birth forced by karma to come into the world to suffer disease, old age, and death like we did. We're in a wheel called samsara. I call it samsaro because that's what we're seeing everywhere we look. This world is not actually made for your enjoyment. You ever wondered about that? Because everywhere you look, under every leaf, some creature's being eaten alive. Right? And you can't live without causing death and destruction just by walking about, drinking water, eating food, whatever it is. So your karma is assured. That's why the chapter of Karma Yoga that we just went through, Krishna says, Yagyartat karma nyonyatra loko yam karma bandhana tadartam art karmaya mokta sangha samachara. In other words, you have to work for Vishnu. It's not like a suggestion. It's not a suggestion. It is a requirement. You are part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Chinta Beta Beta Tapa. You're one with God qualitatively, different quantitatively. Just like one drop of the ocean is the same quality as the entire ocean, but it's not the whole ocean. You're never going to become God. You're already a part and parcel of God. And your relationship is one of ultimate love with the Lord in servitude, actually. God is serving us in the most amazing ways because everywhere we look, God has given us these experiences and varieties that we have. So, and he's created the environment, the platform, and the whole thing. This is God's Varata Rupa that we're in right now, which is his external separated material energies. And we're living in that environment, and we're undergoing threefold miseries. We're undergoing repeated birth and death, forgetfulness. It's a razor's edge. One little slip, you get some bad reaction. Who knows what's going to happen next? There's danger at every step. I mean, these are just some axioms that we're actually dealing with. But if you know who Krishna is, you know his transcendental nature and appearance, you know what his body is, Krishna says you don't take your birth again in this world, but you attain his eternal abode. So the whole idea, guys, is, and this is everything in one verse, the next verse, which is text 10. I think this verse really, in my mind, tells it all. Because Krishna says that if you become fully absorbed in Krishna, okay? And later in here, we're going to hear the universal form. We're going to hear all these other ways that we can understand who God is, taste of water, light of the sun and the moon, all of these things we're going to learn about God. Our goal is to become Krishna conscious every second, every moment. There is no past. There's no past. That's an illusion. Prove it. I mean, you may build a statue somewhere and the pigeons come crap on your head. That's what fame leads to in the material world. Pigeon crap. I see Drew laughing at least. But don't worry, they'll come with a wire brush, scrape it off every few years. Or they might just pull you down.
I might need scraping a little more than every 2 years, probably every day.
That's funny. But so here's the thing. If you take refuge in Krishna, then you can become free from fear. You can become free from attachment. You can become free from anger. Because guess what? You don't own anything. God owns everything you're looking at. He's provided it all for you out of love and care for you. You dreamed it, God provided it. Man proposes, God disposes. You can't say that you've created the earth, the sky, the moon, the clouds, the water, the whole system. No one's created that. Sri Upanishad talks about that, describes that God did that. He's the seed-giving father of all living entities. This is his creation. And we're here as parts of that play. It's a great drama. And depending on how you want to experience your rasa with God, you can develop that in a state of transcendental love, and you can become free from any karmic reaction and become in full knowledge of God. That's what we're here doing now. So the next verse, which is an excellent verse, is 4:11. There's only a couple of more verses that we want to chant. But this one Prabhupada quotes all the time. Yeyata mang prapadyante tangs tataiva bhajamya mama manavartante manusya parta sarvasha. So that means, as all surrender to me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Prita. What does he mean by everyone's following his path in all respects? What is that? Seems like we've deviated from his path, right? But we're still following Krishna's path because the whole action, reaction in the material world, all of that is created by God. So there's no way, I mean, we're marinated in God. I mean, literally. We're in the reduction sauce here. And we're marinating. Because there's nothing you can see that is not God. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can be. Everything is given to us by God. And so everyone is actually following the system that God set up within the material world. And there's really no escaping that, to be candid with you. The interesting feature is that God doesn't force anything upon you. It's not being forced. You are forcing it upon yourself by your own actions. And that's what we talked about in our chapter of Karma Yoga. You're not punished by hate. Not punished for hate. You're punished by hate. See what I'm saying? So you're not punished for it, but you're punished by it. So whatever you've done, you're being punished. You're creating your own jail cell and decorating it according to your own desire. You see what I'm saying? And that's what's happening in the material world. So all these systems, like the three modes of nature, are created by the Lord. Everyone is following in those paths. Krishna then goes on to explain in 14, there's no work that affects him. He doesn't aspire for the fruits of action. So one needs to understand that truth about Krishna to become unentangled in the fruitive reactions of work. And this is how they've done it throughout all history. Liberated souls have understood God, and they've understood how to go about that. Now, the intricacies of action and reaction are very, very difficult to understand. You would have to have a massive computer bank to figure that out, some artificial intelligence or something. I don't think there's any way that you could understand how the karma and interaction of karma between all people is going on. It's unlimitedly nuanced. So therefore, the intricacies of action are very hard to understand. But one must understand what is proper action and what is forbidden action and what is inaction. We got to know what those things are. What's happening to the vast majority of people, they don't have an education in this great science, imperishable science. And as a result, they're walking around bumping into the walls in the dark. Turn the lights off in your house and see how you end up. Your head's going to be bruised. You're going to have a busted nose. You don't know what to do. You don't know, you probably just stop doing anything because all you're doing is hurting yourself. So, and we talked about that before where, sometimes a mother will tell the child if it can't learn the right thing to do, just don't do anything. Go sit in the corner. That's not the solution. because Krishna described in the previous chapter that even by inaction, that you can't become liberated like that. Some people try, but it doesn't work, because you're going to be active at every moment. So Krishna goes on to say that, but one is understood to be in full knowledge, who is devoid of the desire for material sense gratification. In other words, don't be compelled, like Krishna described to Arjuna, by lust. Don't be compelled by greed. Don't be compelled by false ego, by the desire for power. Currently, we're reading the story about Hiranyakashipu. He was the epitome of someone who was doing all the wrong stuff. And if you read that story, we'll be talking about that this coming Sunday at Happy Go Yogi. If you guys could be there, I think you'll love that story. It's amazing. But it's contrasted with his son, Prahlad Maharaj, who was the pure devotee of the Lord. So you get to see the face of evil in the face of pure devotion. And it's such a massive contrast that it really has a profound effect in your understanding. By hearing this story, it's in the 7th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. You can find it on Vedabase.io if you want to look that up. Story of Nrsingadev. Okay, so this is a verse that I think is also highly descriptive. And I think if we meditate on this one verse, we could understand how to get out of this place. Now, some people think this is a great place. Obviously, they're going to the demigods to get more money, more wealth, more power, more this, more beautiful women, more this, whatever they want. You can try to get it here, but you'll lose it all. Brahma bhuvanal loka, lokoyam karma bandhana. In other words, from the highest planet down to the lowest, you're going to lose everything. It's no question about it. In the meantime, you're going to experience threefold miseries: old age and death. So Krishna says, give up the desire for this sense gratification that's driving us crazy. It's a fire that will never be quenched. So he goes on to say that if you abandon all attachment to the results of your activities, you become ever satisfied and independent. You're not really performing these fruitive actions, although you're engaged in all kinds of undertakings. So this is a real important point in this next verse. It is text 21, if you want to look it up. Such a man of understanding acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled, gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions, acts only for the bare necessities of life, thus working is not affected by sinful reactions. He's satisfied with whatever comes of its own accord, and he's not affected by success, failure. He's not entangled. So you become unattached by the modes of material nature. And text 24, a person who's fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of the full contribution to spiritual activities in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. Now that verse, I think, is one worth meditating on because you're going to be unlimitedly active. So how do you dovetail all of your activities in Krishna's service? How do you see everything as being a great gift from Krishna? How do you become Krishna conscious 100%? That's the secret that we're trying to find in this life. And by all means, one should get Krishna, however you can do it. It's described in the Srimad Bhagavatam that those persons who were meditating on Krishna as an enemy also got liberation. Because by meditating on Krishna, one gets liberation. God is equal to everyone. The first chapter, the 7th canto, describes Krishna's equilibrium. He delivers the demons by killing them, and he saves the sadhus by delivering them. So he loves us all. He wants us all back, and he's impartial in that situation. So try to imagine if you could take your practical life and you could see how it could be connected back to God, and you offer it as a sacrifice, right? Everything should be a sacrifice. A sacrifice means that I give you something selflessly. I don't expect any return. That's a sacrifice. So love is a great sacrifice because love means I give myself to you unconditionally. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu described that in his Shishastakam. And you can read those verses where he says, you know, I'm yours, you're free to do anything and everything because you're my worshipful Lord unconditionally. So our situation is we're owned by God. We're his possession. And so therefore in that situation, he wants to be owned by us. And everything that we see is a great gift. So what happens is when we develop this love and relationship and we see everything that we do connected back to God, that's called yoga. That's a union with God. And that's what we're trying to achieve. So he goes through from text 25 to 30. He describes how to work in sacrifice. Some people do it very differently. Some yogis worship the demigods, offer different sacrifices to them and to try to get material gain. Some people go and offer sacrifice to achieve the supreme Brahman. Brahman is the light of God's body. They want an impersonal relationship with God. Some sacrifice the hearing process and the senses in the fire of mental control. So that's Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam. Shravanam means to hear about God, just like you're doing now. Shravanam, Kirtanam means to speak about it. Whatever you've learned, just repeat it. You know, we don't have to make stuff up. There's enough here. I mean, you'd never get through all this. I mean, so much voluminous material for you. If you have an inquiring mind, certainly there's plenty of opportunity to satisfy that inquiring mind. Jnana Yoga is part of that process. So householders, they offer their objects of the senses in the fire of the senses because they offer their children, they offer their houses, the temple, they offer their whatever the fruits of their activity they offer to God as a sacrifice. But does God take it all and leave you with nothing? No. Go make an offering tonight of some beautiful foodstuffs. Bow down on your hands and knees, offer to God and appreciate what he's done. And see if there's any left on the plate. Okay? Your hope would be there's none left. Because that means Krishna came there and ate it all up. I'd be licking that plate. So there's other ways to do it as well. So some have taken strict vows, sacrificed their possessions, perform severe austerities. They can practice the yoga eightfold mysticism, which is the Patanjali, what most currently we regard as Patanjali, but it's the actual Ashtanga yoga system. Yamani Yama, Pratyahara, Pranayam, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. Can practice that. Some are inclined to that. It's very difficult in this age, by the way. Or some people prefer Jnana Yoga, study the Vedas. Still others inclined to breath restraint, just doing it by offering the incoming breath to the outcoming breath as a sacrifice and ultimately stop all breathing. What? They're doing it and they're living long lives doing that. If you go to Kumbh Mela, Magh Mela in India, you'll run into some of these folks, man. So there's all kind of people doing that, trying to remain in a trance, stopping all breathing. Others curtail the eating process. There's so many things that you can do to do sacrifice. Our sacrifice in the modern age, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is Harinama, Harinama, Harinama eva kevalam. Kalo nasteva, 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 gatya taha. What we want to do is chant God's names. And what are we saying? Please come. Please deliver me. Please give me your service. Please give me your association. Please let me find my original relationship of loving devotional service to you. That's all I'm asking. I'm lost in an ocean of death. I mean, can you come and save me? Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama, 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 Hare Hare. That's what we're doing. We're begging like little children for their mother. So that's the purpose of our lives. That's the Yuga Dharma. That's what we're here for. We don't have to do all these other difficult processes. We just have to become Krishna conscious by chanting the holy names, following the regulative principles of freedom as they're described in the Bhagavad-gītā, and in offering our lives back to God in a sacrifice. Body, mind, and words. So all these different types of sacrifices are approved in the Vedas, and they're all born of different types of work. But knowing them as such, you can become liberated. So God is not slack on giving us opportunities to come back home. Had it not been for Srila Prabhupada bringing these Vedic texts translated as they are originally, we'd just be here for a few more trillion births. Yep. So now we have the opportunity to finish this business of death in this one lifetime and go back home, back to Godhead. So that's what we want to do. But Krishna says that the sacrifice of knowledge is higher than the sacrifice of just material possessions. Now, if you go to text 34, this is one that Prabhupada, and this is the last one that I want to do the Sanskrit on. And if you guys want to practice this Sanskrit at any point with me, we'll be happy to do that with you. This one is the verse, it's Tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevya upadekshanti te gyanam gyaninas tattvadarshinaha. What that means is that just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively. Render service to the spiritual master. Self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. Man, let me tell you, the other day I was looking on Amazon trying to buy a book that one of my godbrothers wrote, and there are millions of books about nonsense. And most of them are just somebody's opinion. Would you trust your soul to someone's opinion? Think about it. Yeah, I'm gonna follow this guy. I mean, we were talking about these yogis who have create their own version of yoga and this and that or whatever it might be. Good luck. Krishna says in Bhagavad-gītā, give up all varieties of sense gratification created by mental concoction. Mental concoction? So you're a little creator, just like Krishna is a big creator. Brahma's a big creator. But you can create from mental concoction all this deviated philosophy, these deviated practices. Most of it's for profit, fame, adoration, distinction. Our goal is not like that. We don't want many followers. We don't want these prestige. We don't want the money. We don't want all that. We want to go back home and develop our love for God. That's the only thing that will truly satisfy. So how do we do that? We approach the spiritual master. Tadvidi pranipratena pariprashnena sevya upadekshanti te gyana gyaninas tattvadarshinaha. So that is the process of submissive hearing, pariprasena, submissive hearing, inquiries of the spiritual master. Sevaya, right? You hear sometimes the devotees say, I got to go do some seva. Sevaya means offer service. Offer our service. That's what we're here for. Okay, so we're getting to the end of this, and I'm going to open it for questions. But one thing that I think is very, very important is that Krishna says that having obtained real knowledge from a self-realized soul, you will never fall again into such illusion. And by this knowledge, you will see that all living beings are but part of me, or in other words, they are mine. So what happens is when you think you own something in the world, when you think you own another person, when you think you have the rights over other people, or I'm the boss, or I'm this or that, that's all Maya, man. Everything belongs to God. You don't own anything. You're born naked. You'll be leaving this planet naked. What could you take with you? Your bank account? Can you buy your way out of this birth and death syndrome? I don't think so. So the idea is you have to understand that everything is God's. And when you do, whatever you do, you go, I do this for you, God. 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 Every step you take, every breath you take, everything that you make, you offer it as a sacrifice. And even if you're considered the most sinful of all sinners, when you're situated in that boat of transcendental knowledge, you'll be able to cross over the ocean of all these miseries. Just like a blazing fire turns to firewood to ash, the fire of knowledge burns ashes, all reactions to your material activities, because now you do everything you do in Krishna consciousness. And that is the eternal consciousness. That's the eternal love, Bhakti Yoga, that goes on in the spiritual world. People aren't in the spiritual world doing Ashtanga Yoga, y'all. Sorry. They don't need to, control the breath and do the asanas. I'm saying it's good for our bodies while we're here. But when you go back to spiritual world, that process is a means to an end. Just like karma. There's no karma in the spiritual world. There's no karma here if you follow these instructions. You'd be a liberated person. So these things are real. So as long as you're faithful and you try to follow these things, you can quickly attain the supreme. Don't be a doubter. What good is it going to be? Doubting. There's no happiness in doubting. You have to follow these revealed scriptures once you accept the spiritual master. And Krishna goes on to say that therefore the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of your ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. And then those final famous words that I love so much. Armed with yoga, O Bharata, stand and fight. We have a song Bhaktivinoda wrote called Heroic Man. I did that song back in the 70s. And it says, it's a song about stand up, heroic man. So you have to arm yourself with yoga. Every day you should get up, practice your yoga. Every day you should study the Shastras. And while you're driving, while you're doing everything you're doing, keep yourself in a Krishna conscious state. So that is the message. And is there any questions or any comments that you guys might have? Just unmute yourself. Yeah, go ahead.
Krishna talks about all the things we need to do to achieve, basically enlightenment and go back to Godhead. But I mean, obviously, as being humans in this material body, we are subject to a lot of failings along the way. And no one's ever going to get it right every single day. Like you said, every day you get up, you're going to slip. So what's the qualification to know that you've kind of made it, to that next spiritual step and you don't have to repeat the cycle? I mean, is there a certain percentage, like I'm right 80% of the time? And, what I mean?
I love that question. That's fantastic.
I'm not generating call most of the time, or, I don't know. I never saw that really referenced, like where they're, okay, now you're here, or you're a percentage away, next life you'll get it or whatever,
That's an excellent question. Actually, wonderful question. Krishna says, in this endeavor, there's no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path will protect you from the greatest type of fear or danger. So yes, you've been here for millions of lifetimes. You've messed it up, or you still wouldn't be here. You still wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be taking another material body. So it may take a few lifetimes to get out of here. But if you're really sincere and you accept a spiritual master and you follow the instructions of the spiritual master in a dedicated way, and you follow your sadhana bhakti. Sadhana means the practice of yoga. I mean, we have a fairly strict practice of yoga as disciples of the guru, and it involves, 16 rounds of chanting Hare Krishna, following 4 regulative principles, and offering all of our food to the Lord, and, using our talents, our skills, and our abilities for the glorification of God in some way. And if we have some result from our activities, we want to offer some of that back to the Lord. I mean, it's actually a simple process. if you're going to procreate children, do it for the Lord, make them pure devotees. You know what I'm saying? Try to make those children a gift to the world, a wonderful solution and healing ointment to the world instead of just another filled jail cell. You understand what I'm saying? So, yeah, it's not really a hard process. A lot of people, when they hear renunciation, everybody's like, "Oh my God, that's not for me. I can't renounce." So this Bhakti Yoga program is for you. And the reason it is because every other style of yoga that we just talked about requires complete celibacy, requires, I mean, you wouldn't believe the austerities that you would have to receive. I mean, it would be almost impossible for a modern person to get out of this mess with any of the other forms of yoga. But devotional service is so sweet. Love is delicious. It's better than any delicious food you can imagine. Love is the sweetest thing of all. And when you have love, your heart melts. God is living in your heart. You're just overflowing with these feelings of emotion for the Lord, and they're all wonderful and they're very satisfying. So once you get a higher taste, you don't worry about all these, these regulative principles. All this nonsense falls away anyway because you're experiencing something higher. It'd be like me saying, okay, here's a dog, in one hand, what you have to pick up in your little doggy bag when you go outside, scooping, right? Here's that. Or here's a nice, wonderful sweet ball offered to the Lord. I mean, make a choice. Which one did you want? It's just not really a choice. It becomes more natural, and if it turns into sadhana bhakti, turns into raganuga bhakti, or the spontaneous act of devotion. Gratitude. What happens is you become so grateful for all this stuff that you're just walking around crying, going, "God, thank you." See what I'm saying?
Thank you.
So
Yes.
yeah, you can't worry about all those things. What you need to do is develop your devotion, and Krishna will reciprocate, and then gradually all these things will work themselves out. And one time they said, if I'm not perfect in my sadhana or whatever, and I forget Krishna at the time of death, well, guess what? Krishna won't forget you. He's not going to forget you. He will remember all of those wonderful devotional acts of sacrifice that you performed out of love for the Lord. That's an excellent question. Well, we can even talk about that for another couple of hours, but we better not. So, is there anything else anybody else wants to add?
I have a question. Hello.
Hey,
It's
Corey!
Hey.
Good to see
I
you.
did.
Good to see
I
you.
did. I snuck in.
You got a pretty smile. You're beaming right now.
Thank you.
Glad you're here.
So this is more like, like my brain. This is to answer my brain. My soul doesn't need the answers as much as my brain does, my mind. But so Krishna, the Vishnu and Krishna, right? Like Krishna is supposedly an incarnation of Vishnu.
Well, now that is a misunderstanding. I hate to say that, but it is.
Yeah, that's where I get confused because like Krishna here seems like the supreme Godhead, right? But in so many other literatures, it's like Rama and Krishna come from Vishnu. So what's the scoop?
Okay, real simple. I'm gonna make this simple for you. Lord Brahma says, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadir Govinda Sarva Karana Karana. So God, he's the original personality of Godhead, the one without a second. His body is eternal. He's not part of the material world. This is an expansion from him. And so, okay, Vishnu's job is maintaining the material universes. Brahma's job is to create them through that sound of Krishna's flute, through that self-realization that he's empowered to do that. Shiva is also empowered by God. He's an incarnation to destroy the material world. But Krishna's hanging out in the groves of Vrindavan playing on his flute. He's not worried about creating your world. He's got expansions, okay? Portions of plenary portions that do all that work. Krishna is sporting with Radharani, right? I mean, Narayan does all that in the spiritual sky. There's unlimited Narayan planets, but there's one, a Goloka Vrindavan. Goloka Vrindavan is Krishna and his simple, loving affairs with his mother, with his father, with his girlfriend, with the cowherd boys, with the cows. He's not sitting sweating over, okay, which demon do I have to come and kill necessarily? But he does come as part of his pastimes, and he comes through an expansion of Vishnu to do that. But he is the original source of all of the expansions of God. So Radharani and Balaram are the first expansions of God's energy. There's one energetic and unlimited energies, and he expands unlimitedly in various forms to have a relationship with Corey.
So he's the before and the after.
Huh?
He's the before and the
He's
after.
he's the Alpha Omega.
Yeah.
So it can be a little bit inconceivable, but try to understand. There's a axiom in the Vedas that says the one has become many for the sake of rasa. So God, Krishna, is the original form of Godhead. That's why when we say the personality of Godhead, so that we understand that it's not some subcategory of God, because there's a Brahma, a Shiva, and a Vishnu in every universe, expanded from Krishna.
Okay, that helps.
Trillions of universes. And
That's
so
super helpful.
Manifests like that. He also manifests as Garbhodakshayi Vishnu, Shirodakshayi Vishnu, Mahavishnu. So he expands to create these material worlds because we want to be deviated. So he gives us an opportunity to play God. We come here to play God. Let's see if you can become God. Good luck. And that didn't work out. Okay, now surrender. Come on.
So is Rama an incarnation of
He's an
Krishna?
avatar of Krishna. Everything is an avatar. In other words, Ram, and they come millennium after millennium after. We just read that earlier. I don't know if you were.
Yeah, where he comes in at like yuga after yuga after yuga.
Yuga, right. So
Yuga.
Krishna's coming again and again and again and again to reestablish principles of religion and to annihilate the miscreants and protect his devotees. So he expands. If you look in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's 22 primary incarnations that come, and they come in all monarchs of all species. God just doesn't just come as a human form. He comes in other forms as well. So you can read Srimad Bhagavatam. It's very detailed. I'd be happy to read it with you, Corey.
Yeah, I would love that. My little like intellect mind gets caught up in these things, and I'm like, I know there's some different answers. Let's just find them.
Well, you're a serious student of Bhagavad-gītā, and I'm grateful for that, because by studying this knowledge, you're guaranteed by Krishna that he'll come to you in that form of knowledge and expand himself in your heart, and you'll become self-realized. And as you become self-realized, you become God-realized. And as you become God-realized, you become happy finally. And when you become happy, you're on the path and you don't deviate. You don't deviate from the path. Once you got the nectar of devotion in your heart and soul, then you become addicted. It's kind of like, okay, Rama means the source of all pleasure. What are we looking for here? Pleasure. Everyone. And we're looking in all the wrong places. Some people try to find it in heroin, drugs, fentanyl. Some people try to find it in, unrestricted behavior of all descriptions. They end up in a hospital or diseased or dead. If you're looking for pleasure in the wrong places, you're liable to get mugged and rolled and robbed or raped or God knows what. So you need to, Krishna says, keep all abominable activities far removed by this process of devotional service. See what I'm saying?
Thank you. Yes, I'm like in diapers, like crawling on the path. I'm like not even walking yet.
You're doing good. You're doing real good. And you've been coming to these Gita classes for many years, on and off. And so we're very happy that you're here, Corey, and we're here to help you in any way we can.
Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me. Thanks, everyone.
Hare Krishna. Anything else? Anything else? You want to have just a couple of minutes of kirtan before we go? Is that what we're looking to do? All right. So this one, I think you might know. This is Radhe Shyam, right? I know Susan and I, we've chanted this together a few times, haven't we, Susan? Okay. So it's we'll do just a little bit, and then we'll end the program. Okay, so I'll just go right in. Radhe 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 Shyam Govinda Radhe Jai Shri Radhe 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 Shyam Govinda Radhe Jai Shri Radhe. Sing with me. Radhe 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 Shyam Govinda Radhe Jai Shri Radhe. Radhe 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 Shyam Govinda Radhe Jai Shri Radhe. O Govinda Radhe Radhe Shyam Gopala Radhe Radhe Govinda Radhe Radhe Shyam Gopala Radhe Radhe. Radhe 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 Shyam Govinda Radhe Jai Shri Radhe. Radhe 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 Shyam Govinda Radhe Jai Shri Radhe. Radhe 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 Shyam Govinda Radhe Jai Shri Radhe. Radhe 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 Shyam Govinda Radhe Jai Shri Radhe. Govinda Radhe Radhe Shyam Gopala Radhe 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 Radhe. O Radhe 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 Radhe. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Oh Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Ramo 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Ramo 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 Hare Hare. Oh Radhe 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 Shyam. Haribo!
Haribo.
All right.
Gayatri, I think Denise might have had a question.
Okay.
Denise?
Okay, I'll try to make it quick. So in the second chapter, there was a term they referred to several times, sacred lore. Can you give me some context on what that entails?
Well, I'm not sure exactly where you saw that, but I would say that lore generally refers to history, right? Like the past, like great lore, of the past. So that would be the Puranas, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, like that probably. And then sacred would mean that these are topics that discuss the fame, form, pastimes, and holy names of different incarnations of God or God's devotees. So that would be sacred lore. Just like when we talk about the Bhagavad-gītā, we're talking about an ancient text that goes back 5,000 years ago, which is part of an even more ancient text, which is called the Mahabharata, which is the history of the world. And then if we go back to Ramayana, that's a couple of million years old. So, I mean, we get lost in 2,000 years. I mean, we can't even deal with that, because the wind, the rain, the water, Krishna describes that Dehino Smenyata Dehe Kamarang Javanangjara. In the Bhagavad-gītā, he says that the soul is not withered by the wind, moistened by the water, burned by fire, cut into any pieces by weapons. So the soul is forever, but this earth is endlessly mutable. So many times sacred lore gets lost, and people think, oh, it's just mythology. See what I mean? And they don't take it seriously. So when you get the spiritual master, when you tadvidi pranipatena pariprashanena sevaya, when you do like that and you start listening to devotees of the Lord who've dedicated their life to the service of the Lord, then you get an insight that these things are real, that these things actually are histories, that there's great lessons to be learned by hearing these histories, and that by applying this truth to our lives, we can become happy. Not only happy, we can become free from death, free from karma, and go back home, back to Godhead, where you live eternally in a self-same body like the Lord is, Satchidananda Vigraha. Ishvara Parama Krishna, Satchidananda Vigraha. His body is made out of eternality, absolute knowledge of everything, and bliss with form. So wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? Because I've got a friend right now who's laying in the hospital bed, very old body, all diseased, may not make it. I mean, nobody wants to be in that spot. And when we go to a funeral, they say everybody's religious at a funeral. But then as soon as the funeral's over, they get back in their illusion thinking, well, I'm going to go have some fun, But soon they'll be at the funeral, but it'll be their funeral. See what I'm saying? So while you're alive, while you're healthy, while you have cognizance, use your intelligence and your mind and your body and your words and your efforts to become self-realized, because that is the purpose of life. Even the roach bugs are eating, sleeping, having sex, they're mating, they got a little roach bug family. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, even the amoebas are doing it. So, if that's the purpose of life, man, we're in trouble, because we're no better than the insects at that point. So we just have to understand that there is a higher purpose of this life. Bhagavad-gītā is spoken to describe to you that higher purpose, and it's designed to bring you that joy and that happiness and that pleasure that you've always been looking for but just couldn't find. Listen, guys, you can, if you like doing something, just keep doing it until you're sick, because that's what you get. You know what I mean? You're just going to do it till you're sick. Just like they put cocaine in the cell with the monkeys, and they just kept doing it until they died. Their hearts exploded. So that's what sense gratification does for us. There's no real finite conclusion or happiness to just gratifying. You can feed your senses unlimitedly, and your mind can concoct all these various weird deviations to try to bring you some pleasure. But the truth is that you're part and parcel of God. God's come over and over again to remind you of that. He wants you back. No one can satisfy God like you can. You're an individual soul. There's no other one like you. So you are precious. And God loves you, and he wants that relationship back. So that's the whole purpose of Bhakti Yoga. And it's the purpose of the entire yoga system, because Krishna in the Bhagavad-gītā gives us basically Ashtanga Yoga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, a little Sankhya Yoga in there, and Bhakti. Now, Bhakti is when you step off the ladder and you go back home. Bhakti is the final solution. Bhakti is the end goal. It is the method and the goal of the method, and it's the purpose. And it is self-satisfying. In other words, just when you're doing bhakti, you're already at the end goal. You're already there. See what I mean? I hope that answered your question, but anything else?
Gayatri, can you the was it the Ishvara Prani then like Sajda Vigraha like
Yeah,
that?
yeah, that's from Brahma Samhita. That's the first verse in Brahma Samhita. That's what Brahma said. So the creator of the universe should be the authority, right? I mean, right? If somebody created the universe and you go to them and go, well, you created all this stuff, everything expanded through you, who's God? And he goes, well, that Ishvara Parama Krishna. He's further known as Govinda, in case you were in any doubt. You know what I mean?
That's so beautiful. I'm gonna go look it up because I want to have that written down. That's something I want to, it just really resonated. I want to kind of like put that in like the mirror in the bathroom or in the car. Like it's just so potent.
Yeah, that's perfect. So Brahma himself is speaking directly to you and telling you who is God and who is the one who empowered him. And so if you read the Brahma Samhita, it's one of the most beautiful verses, because it's just one praise after the next of Krishna.
Thank you. It's beautiful.
Yeah, you'll love it. Yeah, and yeah, there you go. So we chant some of the Brahma Samhita. What is it? Venum kvanantam marabinta dalaya taksha bar habatam samasitam buddha sundarangam kandarpa koti kamaniyam vise shashobam govindam adi purusham tamaham bhajami. So at the end of every verse, Brahma gives this whole description of who is God and what he's doing and what he looks like and where he lives and who's his girlfriend. I mean, what he's everything. And then he says Govindam adi purusham. Adi means the first without a second. Purusham means the supreme God. Govindam is the supreme God, the first without a second. That should answer those questions about his expansion in Narayan forms and forearms and coming in different avatars. And he comes down through the system to do that, but he comes to deliver you and me. Right?
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, that's how that works. So, okay, you guys are, wow, man, you're fired up. It's 8:20. You just can't get enough, okay? I love it, y'all. So thank y'all so much for being here tonight. I want to offer my respects to each one of you. You're great souls because you've dedicated in sacrifice your time, your body, your mind, and your words, and your ears. Shravanam Kirtanam. So you hear about God, and then you start speaking about God, and then you remember God. That's called Krishna consciousness. And so by being Krishna conscious, a person can transfer back to spiritual world, even in the hour of death. So keep that in mind. And then next week, we're on the 5th chapter. So we're going to have some more fun, and we'll send out a notice about that and be looking forward to every one of you being there at that time. Okay? All right. Much love to you guys. Really appreciate your time tonight. Just let me know if there's anything I can do to help. Okay? Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Haribo. Haribo.
Haribo.
Hare.